Welcome to the fourth video in our virtual quilt show series. Earlier this week, we explored the care of quilts, dating quilts by their fabrics, and the style of crazy quilts. Today we are discussing signature and redwork quilts. In the 1820s, bound paper albums were popular to capture autographs and inscriptions. Around 1840, this practice was applied to quilts. Signature quilts are group projects which have a number of signatures either written, stamped, or embroidered on the quilt surface. They were popular during the 1840s and 1850s, with a resurgence from 1890 to 1920. Signature quilts were often presented as a keepsake to people moving westward and leaving their friends and family behind. Quilt historians recognize two styles of signature quilts. The first is the album style, where each block is different. The album style presented an opportunity to experiment with technique in design placement and to practice stitches. The second style of signature quilt is friendship, where each block tends to be the same from a single pattern. Friendship quilts were signed by family and friends of a loved one who was moving westward. Both styles of signature quilts can be pieced blocks, applique, crazy quilt, or only embroidery. Signature quilts were often made as a presentation gift for an honored member leaving the community, such as a minister or a teacher. Friendship and presentation quilts tend to have a small number of signatures on the entire quilt. This quilt has one signature in the center of each block, which is only 36 people. Signature quilts were also made as fundraisers, intended to raise money to support an organization or a cause. For a small payment, usually a dime, an individual or family name would be applied to a block. The finished quilt may have been raffled to raise even more money for the cause. Fundraiser signature quilts were popular from 1880 to 1950. This quilt was donated to the Beloit Historical Society in 1919. The quilt was made by the Young Women's Guild of the Methodist Episcopal Church during World War I to raise money for the Red Cross. 10 cents was charged for each name to be written on the quilt. This quilt raised $151. Quilt historians study Red Cross quilts as a subgroup of fundraising signature quilts. During World War I, women across the country wanted to support the war effort from home. Red Cross quilts usually included a Red Cross motif and were pieced, appliqued, or embroidered. Proceeds from the quilt supported the Red Cross's efforts during the war. This quilt from the Beloit Historical Society collection is likely to have been a fundraiser quilt based on the number of embroidered signatures. Fundraiser quilts differed from friendship signature quilts by having many more signatures, sometimes covering the quilt surface. This quilt also has an interesting design feature of every other block being turned. This provides visual interest to the quilt. The quilt was made by the women of the Baptist Christian Endeavor Society at the First Baptist Church of Beloit in 1900. A center block recognizes Pastor Howland Hansen. An adjacent block provides the information, this quilt given to Mrs. Alice Brooke as a prize for procuring the most names, 210. A primary focus of fundraising quilts in the early 20th century is on the signatures and the placement of them in order to create designs. Signature quilts often record dates and places as well as names, providing a place of origin for the quilt. Information on the signature quilts can be combined with census records, city directories, church membership lists, and other paper documents to tell us about relationships within a community. During the Progressive era, which is 1897 to 1920, women used a variety of strategies to advance their causes. Since they were not able to vote, they held fairs and hosted parties to collect donations for signature quilts to raise money. This is technically a quilt top, as a quilt is defined as being made of 3 layers stitched together. This one layer of fabric with elaborately embroidered blocks in red thread and pieced together to form a top. The raw edges are turned under and embroidered into place, indicating that the maker considered this to be finished. It may have functioned as a lightweight summer quilt or a day covering when a bed was made and not in use. The red thread was a popular choice of quilters as the turkey red dye was color fast. The embroidery form's design settings are different in each block, providing great visual interest across the surface. A stem stitch was used to embroider the names and decorative motifs of flowers, birds, a crescent moon, and a horseshoe. A herringbone embroidery stitch was applied along the seam lines between the blocks, similar to the embroidery seen in crazy quilts. Embroidery along the seam lines helps to stabilize and strengthen the seams. Signature quilts enjoyed a revival in the 1880s and 1890s, with some differences from the quilts made in the 1850s. The repeated block from one pattern became more popular than the album style of signature quilt. An embroidered date, May 26, 1880, combined with the fabrics used pinpoints the date of this quilt to the day. The pieced block in this quilt is known as the tulip ladyfinger. It is a pieced block that provides space in the center square for a signature. Based on the bright colors and prints of the fabrics in this quilt, it dates to the 1930s to 1950s. The maple leaf block is set on point, giving a diamond-shaped appearance to the block. An alternate plain block provides space for a signature. The embroidered signatures indicate that they were stitched by different people, likely each person stitching their own name. The signatures have the appearance of different handwriting styles. Signature quilts are still made today in a wide range of block patterns for retirements, weddings, and reunions. Redwork quilts became popular in the 1870s, overlapping with the resurgence of the signature quilts in the 1880s. Redwork takes its name from the use of turkey red dye, embroidery thread, used to outline stitch designs that were usually on white fabric. This quilt was either made by Clara Lucretia Holmes or was a gift to her. Clara was born in Beloit in 1865, making her 27 years old in 1892. The date stitched on the quilt. A search of the Beloit city directories revealed that Clara's sister Jenny was a professional stitcher and that Clara was a teacher at Parker School. Although we uncovered more clues, there is more to this story that will require additional research. The stitched words at the top, sleep descends and twilight ends, at the bottom indicates that this quilt was intended as a bed covering. The popularity of redwork also overlapped the popular crazy quilt style of the 1890s. Motifs seen in redwork are also seen in many crazy quilts. Stitched designs of fans, flowers, animals, and children are typical designs of the late 19th century. Spider webs are often seen in the late 19th century quilts as it was a symbol of good luck. Redwork was a popular technique for house linens. These pillow covers have embroidered sayings related to sleep and waking. Redwork remained popular through 1925. During this time, the variety of color-fast embroidery threads increased, which resulted in interest in multicolored designs. Turkey red remained a favorite, even with the increased use of other colors. Designs focused on animals, plants, and childlike figures in household settings. Kits were sold with pre-marked fabric to make it easier to embroider the designs. Thank you for joining us while we explored the signature and redwork quilts at the Beloit Historical Society.